I would like to introduce to you someone really special. Kwam Huiam of the Stolo people is a professor and associate dean in Indigenous Education, also director of the Native Indian Teacher Education Program, and professor in the Faculty of Education at the University of British Columbia. She is known to the non-Indigenous world as Professor Joanne Archibald. E te whaia te rangatira ngā mihi ki a koe. She has a number of degrees, including, most recently, a Doctor of Letters honoris causa from the Capilano University, and she is also the recipient of the SFU Outstanding Alumni Award for Academic Achievement in 2013. She has got an extraordinary array of achievements, of university degrees, and of particular interest to the creatives present. Her most groundbreaking and visionary contribution to the Indigenous Academy was her book published in 2008 titled Indigenous Storywork, Educating the Heart, Mind, Body and Spirit. And I think for us, as tribal people, as Manawa Whenua people, as Manawa Whenua people, those qualities are essential to our very being. And it is from those qualities, understanding the water, the earth, the spirit, and integrating them within ourselves through story. It is through those qualities that we, as Indigenous peoples, have survived. Hoia nō rā, I will now call Professor Archibald Kwam to the podium, and we will enjoy and reflect upon the genius of her work and its joys as well. Nō reira, tēnā rā koutou.
E latith, e te swail, kwam huiam tasquich te stalo, kapati amisteuch e te swail, yehukwa ashaio siam. Thank you for that wonderful welcome. My name means strong, clear water. I'm from the Stalo people, and Stalo means river, and we're very much connected to the resources and lifeways of the river systems in the Stalo area. I acknowledge the Waikato land and people who have welcomed me here so warmly. And I thank the organizers of the Manawa Whenua Indigenous Research Conference for your wonderful hospitality. I feel very comforted in this land because it reminds me of my home territory where the mountains embrace us and the rivers flow and they give us good teachings and good thoughts for what we will do in the future. I want to start my presentation with a teaching that comes from one of our Musqueam elders, Simlano Vince Dogan. And it's about hands back, hands forward. You see the hands on the slide. And this is an important teaching because it reminds us about responsibility, intergenerational learning, working together, and keeping our Indigenous values and knowledges strong. So I ask you to be a bit participatory first thing in the morning. When Simlano gathered us together to do important work, he often had us sit in a circle, and our tables are like these circles. And he said, when we're together, it is important that we are standing side by side in this symbol of cooperation. And he said, for us, it's important that we reach back to get the help from the ancestors. And he said, we put our left palm upwards. So I'd ask you to participate with me. Put your left palm upwards. And he said, this is the way we reach back to get the help from those who have walked before us. And we get their knowledge and their teachings and we put it into our everyday life. We walk this talk. And then we have the responsibility to pass these teachings and these knowledges on to others. And he said we put our right palm downwards. So if you put your right palm downwards and join hands with the person next to you. If there's no one there, there is someone there. And then just give a little welcome to each other this morning. But no talking. Great. So this is a way that connects us to our past, the present, and what will be our future. And it's a good guide for a lot of the work that we do. The University of British Columbia sits on the traditional and unceded territory of the Musqueam Nation. Musqueam means people of the river grass. And you see in this slide there's the thunderbird, which is our symbol. It's the most powerful supernatural being, and it really challenges us to be the best that we can be. And you see that there's a human face within the thunderbird, which reminds us about the intimate relationship we have between education, people, and our indigeneity. You can see I've reduced the title to make it a bit more simpler this morning. But I want to talk about what Hands Back and Hands Forward has meant to me. And with this, I've reflected on the past 40 years. When I think back, that's when I first began my teaching career as a primary school teacher. And then I want to also think about, well, what will the next 40 years be like? And so I hope to have a little bit of help with that. And maybe Coyote the trickster will come and kind of help us with a story to think about that. I want to perhaps start with where we are. So I'm going to tell some life experience and traditional stories in this presentation. And where I am situated right now at the University of British Columbia Faculty of Education, very Western-oriented university, but we've been claiming and reclaiming some Indigenous space within this university for just over 40 years now. And we have some foundations that have provided us a good space upon which to build. And I want to highlight what we have done in our Indigenous undergraduate and graduate education programs and share what has helped us make those programs the best that they can be, and also share some of the challenges. We've also been able to develop various research infrastructure in helping us conduct Indigenous research that's very much community-based and has the perspectives of Indigenous knowledge. And we have a number of people now as Indigenous faculty members working with us, and my position as Associate Dean for Indigenous Education helps me be at the table where important decisions are being made so that they can't forget about Indigenous education when important decisions are being made in our faculty. And I think most of all, we're at a time where there's lots of excitement and energy that we are creating, working together with many different people. So that's where we are now, but it certainly wasn't where we were 40 years ago. 40 years ago, we started, and this was our first program, I think at the University of British Columbia, was Indigenous Teacher Ed, and at that time we used the term Indian. So the few educators that existed in the province are shown here on the left-hand photo. And these were as I say, the very few Indigenous teachers in the province, and they felt that what was needed was an Indigenous teacher education program. What wasn't needed was to try and put Indigenous people into the existing programs, but to have a program that reflected Indigenous culture and values, and that certainly was community-based. So these Indigenous leaders selected Raven as a symbol, a logo for this program. And this is a very short story about Raven, where often in our Northwest Coast cultures, Raven is a trickster character that can change shape and form and often gets into trouble because that trickster might forget about the good teachings. But once in a while, a trickster can do good things. So people were living in the world of darkness, and Raven saw this, and Raven took pity on those people and had heard that somewhere there was something called the sun that would bring light and better life to people. So Raven took a journey and through various means captured the sun, brought the sun back to the people living in darkness so that they could have a better life. The early innovators of NITEP felt that the sun was like education, that through education, Indigenous children and all children could have a better life through good quality education. So that has been our vision and our goal throughout our program. With NITEP, it is a community-based program where we have regional centers in British Columbia. We build on Indigenous knowledge and culture through about 10 courses that we offer ourselves, and we are in control of who teaches the courses and how they are taught. And then the students do learn other forms of knowledge to help them be good teachers. We are very much a family cohort-based program. We build on the notion of extended family to care for one another, to challenge one another, to support each other. We have a coordinator who teaches, who advises, who provides that one-on-one support, because we believe people are so important, and we do whatever we can to help the students succeed through their Bachelor of Education program. I'm going to share a video that represents how we feel about NITEP. The Native Indian Teacher Education Program, which we call NITEP, began in 1974 in response to the issue of having so few Aboriginal teachers in the province of British Columbia. At that time, we estimated that there were 26 Aboriginal teachers compared to 26,000 non-Aboriginal teachers. NITEP has had such an impact on Aboriginal communities. We have so many more Aboriginal teachers teaching in First Nations schools, in public schools. Some of our graduates are also teaching and working at colleges and universities.
I love teaching because I love to inspire students to be their best, to know who they are, where they come from, and to bring their best to the world.
NITEP to me allows me to bring culture into the classroom, and that means a lot to me.
Many of the graduate students have been working to make systemic change, and that they do this with an Indigenous heart and mind. So with those who have gone through a Bachelor of Education degree program, you know, they get out in the field and they have many heavy expectations placed upon them. But these are now the growing numbers who are entering master's and doctoral programs, looking for ways to improve education and to learn what they can through various research methods that reflect their Indigenous cultures and contexts. So we have moved into areas of graduate studies where we have various concentrations, specializations, courses, and programs that draw on what we've learned through NITEP, that we use a cohort-based, a family structure. We ensure that we build Indigenous knowledge framework so that the diversity of indigeneity is able to be realized, that we could say, I could think of Stalo, Ntlakapamuk, First Cree, Nuu-chah-nuu, the diversity of First Nations and Métis, and ensure that students can address their research in a way that reflects their local community and culture. We have learned through our relationships with other Indigenous peoples, and we've had a strong relationship with Māori people and Māori scholars. In particular, Graham and Linda Smith have visited us, and with Graham, we started what is here the Māori and Indigenous program. We have a SAGE, which we call Supporting Aboriginal Graduate Enhancement, which is a peer support program throughout the province of British Columbia, where we've had about 400 First Nations, Métis graduate students forming this vibrant network from all universities and from all disciplines. In our various programs, we now talk about and use intergenerational learning. It's almost the hands back, hands forward, the same idea that we learn from those who have gone before. We also have elders and cultural knowledge holders mentoring our students, that we ensure our program is holistic, that as we learn different forms of knowledges, we also address our spiritual, emotional, physical parts of ourselves. And in the physical, we think about our actions and what we need to do. The graduates have various experiences, but I think what I see has been very important is that community heart, or the community direction that many of the graduate students have. And I want to highlight another video that shows one of our graduate students who was in an Indigenous Education and Leadership cohort that has worked in Secwepemc Indigenous language immersion for many years.
In her current site-based doctoral research, she's constructing a Secwepemc model of education based on her 20 years of work experience. The commitment to creating a self-sustaining, healthy Secwepemc community is leading to ever-deepening questions for all involved.
How do we build a Secwepemc education program that understands where our compromise exists, but also retains that we are Secwepemc people? Our culture and our language is very intellectual, it's very academic, and children learn just as well, you know, gathering roots and making baskets and checking the weather signs as they do studying in a book. If our language is truthful, then the truth of who we are and why we're here, why we exist, comes through that as well. And we have beautiful teachers through our stories. So we have our beautiful Coyote, our Secret, that teaches us. And I think that's a nice way to learn lessons through somebody else's mistakes too. And it's okay to make mistakes, but there should be something learned from it, and then we can move on to the next level of our learning. The literacy and the numeracy and all those other things that we tie into a modern existence of what they need, and these different standards that we really keep on focusing on. They're going to come and they
I found was that the school was an opportunity not only to explore and teach who I am in a classroom setting and share this discovery with children, but ultimately who am I? Because I think as I grew up, I had no sense of identity in a public school where we didn't study or it was frowned on to even reflect on who you were. And my parents were a product of a system where they wouldn't tell us. So over the years, as a young person, you have these questions. Who am I? Where am I? Why did I get to this particular spot, place, and time?
These children that come from immersion know who they are. They know where their strength lies. They know what their past is all about. They know their language. And so they're all prepared to introduce themselves to this outside world. But they're already formed when they do that. So they're making judgments and they're making decisions for their lifetime that are based in a supportive world. And that's what's going to keep them healthy. I really don't see that we could move forward as Ilmahoe, as Sequatlam, as Aboriginal and Indigenous people in the universe without us connecting to the real thing.
I think that graduate studies is an area of strength and emerging success in Indigenous education. When I began this presentation, I'm trying to stick to my time limit. So I didn't talk too much about, this 40 years. And when I was thinking about the time period of 40 years, well, that's how long I've been in practicing educator in the various school systems. And at that time, we also had the Indian control of Indian education policy, which has had, I think, an important impact on what we've been able to achieve so far in education. And this was a policy formed by grassroots level, by community-based educators, who were defying the federal government's attempt at that time to further assimilate First Nations people. So this policy was based on based on two principles of local control, parental involvement, and also advocated for strategies where Indigenous culture, language, values were to be an integral part of education. So over the years, we can say we've come so far with trying to realize the goal of the Indian education, Indian control of Indian education policy. But I think we still have a long way to go. In this reflection, I guess I have learned 4 things, perhaps maybe 4 lessons that I think I can take with me perhaps into the next few years of working in education. And they relate to the community and leadership that I've come to realize community self-determination, engagement, and well-being certainly remain important and vital goals that we need to keep working towards, that we also need courageous Indigenous leadership. We've had that when we had the Indian control of Indian education policy with the establishment of NITEP, which has been going for 40 years, which is quite an accomplishment for an Indigenous teacher education program within a Western university. But that we also have to have this courageous leadership that resists new forms of assimilation, that helps us persist in this complex world that we now live in, that our Indigenous values and Indigenous knowledges continue to be a strong foundational framework in which we can place our specific First Nations, Métis, Indigenous cultures, that systemic change is necessary and needs to have a way to sustain these changes, especially within Western-oriented educational systems in which many of the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children in Canada are still in those particular systems, that the alliances and networks that we form help reinforce and expand our various perspectives. So, Coyote, Transformer, Trickster, Helper, Challenger. I want you to use your imaginations for a little bit in this next story to think about, as I tell this story that I heard from Dr. Eberhampton from the Chickasaw Nation, and who has lived in Saskatchewan for many years, and he allowed me to adapt this story to a trickster called Old Man Coyote. So, Old Man Coyote decided that it was time to go hunting. So he got his hunting bag and put all these things in it and took off, and he was wandering around, and he went through the forests, and he went up the hills and down the valleys, up mountainsides on this particular day hunting for deer. But he couldn't find any, and so he had walked a long, long ways. And towards the end of the day, he thought maybe he'll set up camp. So he found a nice clearing, and he made a fire, and he was sitting on a log, and it was starting to get dark, and he made the fire, put more wood on it, and it was nice, a blazing, warm fire. And he took out his moccasins from his bag, and he put them on and noticed that there was a hole in the toe of one of the moccasins. So he thought, well, he's got time, he can sew up that moccasin. So he reaches into his bag for his bone needle, and he doesn't find it. And then he gets down on his hands and knees, and he crawls around the campfire, and he goes around a few times, and as he's doing that, an owl is watching him. And then he comes to Old Man Coyote, and he says, I've been watching you go round and round this fire, and I wonder what you're doing. Old Man Coyote tells him that he's searching for this bone needle to sew up his moccasin. And Owl says, well, I'll give you a hand. So the owl makes a swoop around the campfire and tells him it's not there. And he says to Old Man Coyote, where were you when you last used that bone needle? And Coyote says, oh, well, I was in the northern direction. And then the owl says, well, he said, it's not here. Maybe you left it there or somewhere else, but why do you just keep going round and round this campfire? Because you probably know it's not there. And Old Man Coyote says, well, he said, you know, this fire, it gives off such warmth and good light. It's easy to look for the bone needle around this campfire. So that was the story that I heard. And when Dr. Hampton talked about it, he was talking about the relationship between our motives and methods in research. And, you know, that story has made me think about a few things since then, because our stories will stop at a particular point in time. It may not be the nice, tidy ending that we're looking for, but what it signals is that as a listener, as a learner, we need to take responsibility to make meaning, to reflect, to question, and maybe the story will help us do those things. So when I think about the next 40 years, I would perhaps say that those lessons that I quickly went over could be like the non-fossil fuel that feeds the fire, that helps us have warmth and good light. But at the same time, perhaps we need to go into the dark to kind of look for other answers that may provide us with what would be a better life, which is really about well-being, about having our strong Indigenous languages and our cultures, and having the resources of the land be in good relationship with us and for the future generations. And going out in the dark also makes me think about perhaps Raven setting that big goal and taking a long journey to go and get the sun or that big goal that we may be looking for. So I wonder, will I or you be like the raven or old man coyote, or perhaps your own trickster or some combination? So fortunately for us, we have the ancestors' teachings to guide us if we remember to reach back to get their help and then move forward with strength and determination to create a strong future for the current and future generations. I look forward to living and sharing these wonderful stories about the days, years, and decades ahead of us. And to say a special thank you to you for listening, and for the Māori hosts. I'm going to ask one of our wonderful Indigenous graduate students, Francine Burney, to come up to also share a thank you song. And Francine is a graduate student from Six Nations and an important leader within the student group at UBC and within British Columbia.
Sego Guego. Where I come from, we come from a culture that gives thanks for the foods, and we come together to celebrate. Most of what we do in our ceremonies is sing and dance and celebrate, and in that spirit, I want to celebrate the next 40 years of education, Indigenous education, What's happening in this song is that I'm calling all the people of the community to come together and sing and dance in order to give thanks for those gifts, in order to give thanks for the food that we have, those things that nurture us, like education. I just wanted to acknowledge myself as a visitor in the Indigenous peoples' territories, and that I belong to the Mohawk Nation from the Turtle Clan.